Dear listeners, there's this quiet assumption we all carry about getting older, like a kind of invisible contract we never signed, but somehow we agreed to. And it goes like something like this that pain is normal, slowing down is inevitable, and the body you had at 30 is gone for good. But the question comes is if that assumption is just a noise or what? What if the real limitation is not your age, but the story that you have been told about what your body can still do? Good to think about, right? Welcome to Mind Meets Machine. I'm your host, Avik, and this is the podcast where we slow down long enough to ask the questions that matters the most about health, about change, about what it actually takes to live well in the body and the mind that you are in right now. And today, I have to say, I'm joined by a very lovely guest. Please welcome Glenn Owen. So, welcome to the show.
That has to be one of the best introductions to a podcast I've been featured on in a long time. That was great, man. That was very well thought out. That was beautiful. Clearly, you're not a novice at this. Amazing. Thanks so much for having me here. I'm really excited. I don't know if I can top that, but I'll do my best.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Glenn. I mean, it's really, really great to have you here on our podcast. And I believe people are going to definitely learn from you, from your experiences. But before we get into the discussion, I'll definitely love to introduce you with all our listeners. Dear listeners, Glenn is a personal trainer from Newmarket, Ontario, who works with the active adults to strip away the limitations of aging so that they can live strong. That's a good idea, right? Live strong, confident, pain free. And at the same time, he is the creator of the Drive method. Yes, Drive, DRIVE, Drive method, which is a framework for building the strength, mobility, and the stamina that actually fits the body you are living in. So there are a lot of things to discuss today. I'll say just sit back, relax, and have the conversation. So, Glenn, I think a lot of people hear this phrase aging, I mean, gracefully, perfectly, kind of, right? So, and they picture kind of slowing down, like doing less, protecting themselves from a lot of things. So, what do you think is the biggest misconception here that people carry about what their body can actually handle as they get older?
Yeah, I think that kind of what you alluded to in the introduction, where people assume that aging has to mean pain, discomfort, slowing down, and that it's all inevitable. And this kind of very much like it's a downhill spiral and there's nothing we can
Yeah.
do about it, defeatist attitude. And the biggest misconception is that there's always things that you can do to improve your health and wellness. And while it's not something that's going to happen overnight and does take a little bit of time, certainly you can improve mobility, you can improve your strength, you can improve your stamina, and you can get back to doing the activities that you love if you've given up on some of them by doing the right kinds of exercises in the right doses in the right amounts. Probably the biggest misconception is that pain and discomfort is just a part of aging. And I think if that were true, we would all be feeling the same full body discomfort. But the reality is that some people complain about knee pain. Some people complain about back pain. Some people complain about tired, weak legs. Everyone's got a bit of a different complaint. No two complaints and two bodies are ever the same. So if it was the case that all aging is just all pain and discomfort, then why do we all feel a little bit different? And why are there people who can do marathons or go hiking and travel the world in their 80s? These amazing people do exist. What makes them different than you or I or anyone else? And I'm hoping we can discuss and unravel that today in the podcast.
That's really amazing. And that is very, I believe, very important for everyone to understand. And at the same time, when someone walks into your space with that kind of mindset that they are too far gone to or kind of too late to be, I mean, to be in this game, then what is the first shift you try to help them see?
I think the first question I ask people like that is, so why are
Okay.
you even here?
Yeah.
Right. I'm I'm a big believer that the questions are the answers. And I really think that when we are thinking to ourselves, what we're really doing is asking ourselves questions and trying to answer them. Whether you're trying to grow and understand technology, or like I was listening to one of your podcasts where you had someone who's professional speaking on, these different questions. Like thinking is really just asking questions. So if someone's coming in to say that to me, I'm going to ask them, so why are you even here if you've already given up on it?
Mm,
And the reality is that they haven't given up on it. People wouldn't be taking action or coming to see people like me to help them with their
mm,
bodies if they had really given up on it. It's more of a
Yeah.
let's explore this together. Let's ask some questions. Let's figure out where we're at right now and why we're thinking like that, and then see where it takes us.
That's interesting. And here, one more thing I definitely love to ask you here, because when you ask them that why you are here, right? So do you get the correct answers every time, or like I mean, how you feel? Like, is it like we all are in some kind of delulu, or are we not sure like what we actually want to in our life, what we want to achieve? I mean, what's the
Yeah.
structure?
Yeah, that's a great question. And a large part of the first parts of my consultations are asking questions to understand motivation and logic and reasoning behind how they're viewing their body and their discomfort and what their goals might be toward feeling better and inside their exercise process. And so, do I get those answers straight up the first time? No, for two reasons. One, oftentimes people haven't really given it as much thought themselves. So sometimes I'm on a journey with them discovering what their motivations are. I've had people break down in tears in my consultations before because they're saying things to me that they're kind of realizing for the first time, right? Other people, they've given it a lot of thought. They've seen multiple other practitioners for different reasons, and they know their motivations. They know their reasons. So some people, yeah, they know why they're there, and they tell me very quickly, and I dig a little bit deeper, and there's not really much else to say. Other people, they're experiencing a little bit for the first time, and they might even be saying it aloud to another human being for the first time. I mean, you don't get too many people in day-to-day life saying to you, yeah, like I'm want to start exercising, taking care of my body because I saw how much my parents struggle right now, and it worries me to death that I'm going to be like that. It's almost depressing, and they have tears in their eyes. Sometimes that's not everyone, not all the time, but one of the reasons why that's important for anyone pursuing any endeavor, whether you're taking care of your body or you're trying to grow your business or you're spending time with loved ones and you're trying to work through some familial problems, is if you don't really know your motivations deeply and what their motivations are deeply, then you might be solving the wrong problem, right? And life is always a series of problems. And the more you can solve the problems that you want to right now, the more you can move into the next echelon of other problems that might happen. In the world of health, it's like, well, my joint feels better now. Now, what kind of things do I want to be able to do with my body in the future that I can't right now? That's a different problem, a happier problem, albeit. And so, yeah, sometimes people are very clear what their problems are. Sometimes they aren't, but it's always good to engage in a dialogue with people to make sure we're all on the same page and so that they deeply understand what they want. Because then we can figure out how to get there, wherever their goal is, if we really know where they're at right now, both physically and I think mentally, emotionally.
Exactly, exactly. So yeah, that's definitely I agree, and I think we underestimate like how much permission we need to give ourselves, not to reverse the time, but to stop treating our own body like it's a kind of fragile. And there's something powerful in realizing that strength is not about going back. It is all about meeting yourself where you are and building from there. So yeah, and that's the one. So also, I would love to ask you about the drive method. Like where I'm curious is like I mean, what were you seeing in the way people were training or the way they were being told to train that made you feel like something deeper was missing? Or I mean, what? Like, if you can share.
Hmm. That is a good question. So I think this is where I see the need for. I don't want it to be grandiose and self-serving. That's my biggest concern here. So I'll talk about this from a broader perspective. One of the issues I think in the world of exercise and personal training is that a lot of the advice is very generic. And oftentimes, what works for a relatively healthy 20 or 30-year-old is then what's like repackaged and given to someone who's 40s, 50s, 60s, and older. And one of the things that ends up happening as we get older is like we do pick up stuff in our body. Not only do we have our own unique physiology and unique anatomy in terms of how our bones are shaped and how strong we are in different areas and all that other kind of stuff, we also have our own unique injury history, all these different things that our bodies been working with and around in many ways over the past 10, 20, 30 years. And so when you take somebody who's got some physical discomfort and they try to start an exercise plan, if they're doing something that everyone else is doing, like in a group exercise class, or they're just going to the gym and seeing what works, we really don't know if what they're doing is really appropriate for them. as we get older and we have more injuries, more like asymmetries in terms of either discomfort in our body, or we have less range of motion or mobility in one area, or less strength in one area versus another. If we just try to do an exercise and we don't know how our body's loading that up, it could hurt us and irritate some tissues. It could be okay, but we just don't really know. If I was to bring it back to the drive method, I would say the important piece is we're just trying to figure out how to individualize exercise for whoever is in front of us, whoever I'm working with. If you're someone who's listening and you love to exercise, it's all about trying to individualize the process best that you can. And I think one of the things that really resonates with me about like this show is that the questions that you're asking and what we're trying to look at is like, how do we get into the nitty gritty of what that really means? Right? Like, what does it really mean to individualize my exercise? What does it really mean to individualize my, like, coming to my speaking career? What does it really mean to individualize my experience with this thing? And I think a lot of that comes down to, I think this is where the industry misses it. A lot of that comes down to being able to collect more information and more data to make better sense of what's happening. If I was a medical doctor and I was going to prescribe a medication for a patient, I would not just say, okay, you're going to get 500 milligrams of gabapentin twice a day. Here you go. It's like, how did we get there? Did we do like the blood work? What are the symptoms? What do we actually think is the underlying issue for this disease that you have? Let's collect all this information. Let me ask a bunch of questions, get some good data. And oh, it looks like you've got this issue. Great. Let's give you this prescription in this amount because it's going to be the best for you. And let's reevaluate and see how that goes and see if we need to make it more or less, whatever that might be. But at the end of the day, I just don't think exercise is individualized as it needs to be, especially as we get into later decades of life where there's just more different things that could quote unquote go wrong as people accumulate more discomforts and weaknesses in their body.
Thank you. Thank you. And when you say that it fits the body you are living in, so then what does that actually mean in practice? Like, how does that show up differently than a program built for someone half your age?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I would almost reframe it a different way. I would
Okay.
still love somebody who is in their 20s or 30s to have a program that's still individualized for them versus somebody in their 60s who needs an individualized program. It just happens that when you're younger and your body's more resilient and more robust, you can tolerate more poor decisions into your body, right? I mean, anyone who's ever had like a glass of alcohol can attest to this. I don't drink anymore, but when I was drinking, when I was in my 20s and I had some in my 30s, the recovery the next day is really, really different, right? You just don't feel the same. You bounce back a lot quicker when you're younger. And like, as you get older, if you make those physical mistakes and you get in pain, you don't have that kind of leeway anymore. Right. So, I don't know if that answers the question or not. But ultimately, what this kind of comes down to is we just got to be like way more considerate about what people want. I think maybe if I try wording this a little bit differently, if that's okay,
Yeah.
because I think I know I have a better understanding of what you're asking. After apologize being a little verbose.
No, sure. Yeah.
Yeah, that's okay. So if we're thinking about like how do we make exercise work for someone, I think we start with the end in mind. You asked a really interesting question
Okay.
at the very beginning, which is like when people aren't really motivated or they don't know what their motivations are, like what do you ask them, right? Well, the question is like what do you ultimately want to be able to do, right? And
Right.
let's look at 5 years and let's look at the last decade of your life. Because if you're someone in your 40s or 50s and you're dealing with some stuff, and you ask yourself, this is what I want to be able to do in the last 10 years of my life, you have
Hmm.
a much better idea of where you want to end up.
Exactly.
And then if you ask about, well, what do you want to do in the next 5 years? That question usually elucidates from people the kind of things that they're struggling with. When I ask, what do you want to build in the next 5 years? People say, well, I want to be able to go up the stairs better because right now my knee really hurts. Okay,
Right.
excellent. And what do you want to be able to do in the last decade of your life? Well, I'd love to travel, play with my kids, be independent. Great. We know what we're trying to achieve now. So if we know what we want to achieve, we know our destination. And then when we actually look at where we're at right now, we do some like data collection on the body, take a look at maybe some range of motion, some mobility, some strength. There's a bunch of metrics we can talk about if you like. But if we get that, it's almost like figuring out where we're at right now. And we know that if we know where we're at right now and we know what the destination is, it's way easier to plot a plan to get there, and not one that's looking at the next 12 weeks like a lot of fitness plans are, but one that's taking into consideration the next 12 weeks, the next 5 years, but also those later stages of life. And I think that, to answer your question, that's really what the direction that I think a lot of people should be looking in, is not just directly in the future, but like long term, short term, where are we at? Where do we want to go? Let's create a roadmap to get there and then take some action.
Exactly. Exactly. That is very true. That is really, really true. And the next part I wanted to ask, because as you mentioned about it, like about the motivation part you also mentioned. So suppose someone who is listening right now might not be in the gym, so might not have a trainer also. So and they are just tired, maybe a little stiff, maybe little convinced themselves that this is just how it is now. So I mean, what does the beginning of change actually look like for someone like this?
That's a very good question. So let me ask you real quick. Are we assuming somebody right now is motivated to take action, or are they just trying to get themselves from where they're at right now just to get into like any kind of action because they're just not that motivated? I'm just trying to understand the motivational piece here
Exactly.
first.
The second one, like from where they wanted to go ahead.
Okay, so we're assuming they're motivated and they're really ready to
Yeah,
take some direction. Okay,
correct.
I gotcha. So, I'm a big believer in at least investing some of your time into collect some information. This is where things get really, really dicey and hard because, if you don't know about the human body and what to look for and what to do, it can be a little bit more challenging. Having said that, if you said to me, Glenn, I can't go to the gym and I can't exercise, but I want to do something now, kind of what we're saying is, I want something I can just kind of jump right into, low startup cost, take some action. I would say in that case, your best bet, believe it or not, is probably going to be some kind of yoga class, right? And I say that because yoga tends to be a little bit slower, a little bit more gentle. They give lots of different variations for everybody. But more importantly than anything else, and this is kind of where like the science and the data lead to, is that if somebody wants to be more mobile and have more freedom
Yeah,
of movement, what they really need to do is start strengthening their joints in their end range positions. A lot of people feel stiff and they feel achy because they don't spend enough time trying to visit all the different positions their body can get into, right? What most people tend to do is they tend to start stretching. And stretching, the research has shown, really doesn't actually change your mobility, your flexibility all that much. It's a very passive action. For the most part, when people stretch, they're using their hands or their arms or their body parts to try to force almost more range of motion out of their body. And what it turns out is happening here is that because it's a passive act where they may be using their hands to try to pull their chest lower to their leg if they're doing like a classic runner stretch, the body doesn't learn to be more mobile. It just temporarily opens up some range of motion that kind of goes back to the way it was shortly thereafter. What seems like increases mobility the most, that leads to people feeling they have smoother movement, is actually challenging their joints in end range positions, trying to bring your arm all the way up overhead and back, trying to like control your muscles and squeeze down to reach and touch your toes, trying to twist your body as far to one side as you can and the other, and then try to hold these positions. Because what ends up happening is all the different sensory apparatus in your muscles, like your muscle spindles and these things called Golgi tendon organs, they send signals to your brain that tell your body that it's comfortable firing in time and space in that position. The brain actually relearns to organize itself to use those positions and those ranges of motion even better than they did before. And so most people that I work with, when we work together, I encourage resistance training because it's a really great way to train that. Not only do you get the
yeah,
range of motion, but you also get the strength. If you're somebody who is just like, I'm trying to get into something right now and I'm willing to try anything, yoga is great for that. Because if you've ever practiced yoga, you know they do full twist to one side, they do full spinal bending, you're holding positions, you get a little shaky, but it's always done within the context of what makes sense for your body. So I would say if you just want to jump right into something, very little data collection, but you want to get moving today, yoga classes are usually a good place to start.
exactly. So, and what do you want to say about the setbacks part?
Yeah. So
Yeah,
if people experience setbacks, and again, if this is something like, if it's a motivational thing, like we're trying to cognitively get around this thing, setbacks are a part of life, right? You've been podcasting now for a while, from what I can tell. I'm sure there were plenty of setbacks, right? Recordings not coming out the way that I wanted to. Like, am I getting the
yeah,
guests that I want on here? How's the posting schedule? Like, these things happen, right? Like, life is full of setbacks. great, right? Like you keep moving forward, unfortunately. If we're talking about like how do we deal with setbacks from a more practical perspective, I think one of the things that I encourage people to do is like in terms of evaluating, right, what's going on is we got to identify why these setbacks are happening. Generally speaking, when I work with people and we're getting to an exercise program, I want to know before we even get started, what do you think the obstacles are here? What do you think is going to come up? Some people it's time. Some people it's going to be like how much like budget do they want to put towards fitness? Some people it's going to be other priorities. Like I've got a family. I'm in a really business part of my career. Like there's all these different things that can come up. So the question is, before we even get into anything, can we identify these obstacles and then put a structure in place to make sure they don't happen? Right. A real
Exactly.
simple one for people to get. Yeah. A real simple one for people to get from like just like a healthy eating perspective. Because everyone I talk to is always thinking they can eat healthier. That seems to be like a common thing. Right. Most people, they might eat well for a couple days, but they got potato chips in the house. It's late at night, potato chip time. Right. What's the
Yeah.
easiest way to remove that obstacle? Don't have the potato chips in your house. Just don't buy them anymore. And then you can't eat them. You know what I mean? It seems
Exactly.
like, yeah, it's such simple thinking, Vic, but it's very simple. Just like,
Yeah.
here's the obstacle. What are we going to do to address the obstacle before it happens? Move forward. If you do have a setback, great. What an excellent time to review why that setback happened and put another structure in place, right? I mean, that's just like, this is general kind of setback and deal with obstacles 101. If it's an obstacle from like I feel physical pain and discomfort kind of perspective, it's one of those things where you got to figure out why that's happening. Unfortunately, I think it's sometimes a little complex, which is why people hire trainers and physiotherapists and other people help them figure that stuff out. I wouldn't feel comfortable giving any people like direct, succinct fitness and health advice about a certain joint pain over the internet because I just don't exactly know what they're dealing with. And if you don't know what's happening mechanically and physiologically, you could make things worse. But at the end of the day, it really comes down to collect some more information, figure out what's going on, right? Figure out why this thing's happening from a mechanical perspective and just figure out a structure to put in place of it. And if that doesn't work, try another one. I mean, it's not exactly a sexy answer, but ultimately it's the truth.
Yeah, exactly. So, if you have to give one advice to the listeners today, what will you give?
If I'd give one piece of advice to the listeners today, what would it be? I would say that if you are a non exerciser and you want to start exercise and you've been tinkering with it for a while, I would say starting yoga is a great place if you want to ease into it. If you have like the means, eventually doing resistance training is going to be one of the best things that you can do because not only are you going to
Mhm.
build your mobility, but you build strength, your bones get denser, you build more muscle. Everything improves when you do resistance training. And as you get older and your body's recovery slows down, it'll be harder and harder to keep the muscle on your body, harder and harder to keep the mobility. But if you do consistent resistance training, you keep all that kind of stuff. So I would say do some yoga if you're not doing any kind of exercise. And if you're not doing resistance training, but you exercise, please start doing resistance training. I would say on a different note, I would say and just be kind to yourselves out there, right? Like you brought up a really great point, I thought, right? There's some questions about motivation and like, what do I do here? And we tend to beat ourselves up a lot. Like human beings, we tend to be a little bit more in the negative thought process than the positive just because it helped us survive for hundreds of years. We couldn't be like happy all the time and then like run into like a woolly mammoth's mouth and get skewered by it. And then, we're done, right? We have to always be a little cautious all the time, but it doesn't mean we can't be kinder to ourselves. You might be dealing with some stuff right now physically, but there's always actions that you can take. Just be kind to yourself. Take action towards your problems. Don't let things fester because small problems become big problems when we don't do anything.
So, and if listeners wants to connect with you, how they can connect?
Yeah, so they can go to glenowen.ca, GLENOWEN.ca. I've got a book coming out in the next couple months called Done Differently. It's all about an exercise process, like you said, to help people with pain, discomfort, weakness, mobility issues reclaim their life and their health. And it's got some frameworks in there, whether you're exercising on your own or if you're going to use a professional that'll help you out there. So you can check that out at glenowen.ca. That's like, where you can go to find me if you want to learn a little bit more.
Amazing, amazing. So, dear listeners, what I'll do is I'll put all the links, details, everything in the show notes for your reference. And I'll say, like, strength is not something you lose with age. It is something you rebuild again and again in the body you are living in right now. So,
Yeah, I mean, you
thank you so much, Glenn, for sharing your perspectives, your examples, your life story, your how you connect with people. That's really great, and that is really really motivating. And thank you so much, everyone, for being here, for the honesty, for the work you are doing. And there is like, if you're listening right now, maybe you'll be listening later as well. Not tomorrow, not next week. So just notice that how your body feels. Move in a way that's kind. And also remember, the strongest thing that you can do is just start exactly where you are right now. That is what I can say. So with this is your host Avik, and this is Mind Meets Machine. Stay curious, stay human, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you so much.